Hello, hello, hello. I'm so excited to be here with you all tonight for Community Conversations, where we're going to chat about all things OCD. We're going to answer your questions, we'll engage in community, and are just going to have a lot of fun all around. So, as folks come in the next few moments, feel free, if you are here, to say hello, to let us know where you are from, and we will dive in shortly. I'll wait for folks to kind of start popping on before I let everybody know where Ethan is, because I know that's always a question with these particular. Leanne, you are here to get the sandwiches. And Sarah, hi from Houston. Love Lana. So good to see you. As folks are coming in and saying where they're from, I'll go ahead and throw a question out to the group. I feel like I've been stuck on these recently. I keep doing pets and desserts, and I was actually thinking we've done a lot of food recently. We have not done appetizers, which I think is kind of a randomly fun thing. So I wonder, favorite appetizer. I would love to hear if you have a favorite app leading into your meal. What would that be? So let us know where you're watching from, and let us know if you have a favorite appetizer. So I'm going to loop back to those in just a second. As folks are popping in, I'm going to go ahead and read our disclaimers here. So this live stream is educational and is not intended to replace therapy. For treatment-related questions, please work with your provider or contact a local clinician. You can use the IOCDF's online resource directory at iocdf.org/find-help to locate a trained clinician near you. The International OCD Foundation is not a crisis hotline. If you're in a crisis, or if you're ever feeling suicidal or unsafe, please go to your local emergency room or call 911 or the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline by dialing 988. You can also access online at www.988lifeline.org. Finally, we want to create a safe space. We want to be kind and respectful to absolutely everyone, because at the end of the day, we're here to support one another. We're here to advocate alongside one another. But a note that this is being recorded and broadcast on several social media platforms, so please keep that in mind as you comment. And at the end of the day, we're just here to support one another. We are here to respect one another and to be together on the journey. So glad to see so many of you here. I'm going to scroll up and see if anybody plugged in with some appetizers here. Let's see. So I see buffalo wings. And if folks are just popping in, I was asking favorite appetizer. I see calamari, chips, any chips, all chips, just chips. Yes. Chips are really, really good. I've gotten really into pop chips lately. I'm not sure if people are on the pop chips bandwagon, but that's something that I really like. Mike, salad. Okay. Yeah, I love that. I love, I'm curious what folks like. Caesar salad is a big staple in our household. Ooh, spinach and artichoke dip. I will chime in and say, along the dip front, I am originally from right outside of Baltimore, Maryland. So Maryland crab dip is kind of, every time I hear any type of dip, I'm like, Maryland crab dip is where it's at. Let's see. Swiss cheese and cocktail dills or whole baby dills. Awesome. Stacy, sushi rolls. Yes. Pretzels and beer cheese, hummus, prosciutto wrapped asparagus. Okay, y'all, now I'm like super, super hungry. Oh, Maryland lobster is good too. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm hungry. Thank y'all for that, but appreciate you chiming in. As we jump into tonight, I did want to let everyone know, I know a lot of y'all are super used to having Ethan on these streams with you. I will do my best to be a substitute tonight, but did want to let y'all know that that he won't be with us tonight because he's been experiencing some vertigo for the last couple of weeks. He told me to let everyone here know that he will be back very, very soon, and he has lots of stories to tell you when he does get back, because experiencing vertigo and trying to figure out solutions, having to get CAT scans in the midst of health anxiety can be really, really challenging. But I know he appreciates your love and prayers. It's been kind of a tough period for him, but he is doing so much better, and we'll be so, so glad to be back with y'all super soon. So thank y'all. Yeah, I'm seeing the love coming in, and I will definitely let him know that everyone is thinking about him as he recovers. So along the lines of OCD and everything here tonight. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Leanne and Dave and Lola. Really appreciate that. Um, like Ethan often does on these streams, I really want this to be about what y'all want. And I would really love to have y'all bring up any questions, anything that you want to discuss tonight, and we can kind of go from there. I also pulled a bunch of questions from Instagram a little bit earlier that folks submitted that they wanted to hear answers to. But I really like this to be a conversation. So I would love anything that you all are feeling like talking about in this moment, we can jump into. I'm going to start with a question that came in through Instagram earlier. And I would actually love, as I kind of talk with my thoughts about it, if y'all would chime in the chat, because I love seeing everything that y'all have to say about these different topics. So this is a really great question. It's how do you navigate guilt and shame with OCD? Ironically, it's one of the questions that we talked about in our Helping Professionals with OCD special interest group last night. We had like an hour discussion on this. But I'm curious for y'all as you start to think of your own questions. Oh, sorry, I'm reading comments here. Yes, has Ethan done vestibular therapy? Yeah, he's doing, we have been to all the specialists and he's doing PT and he's doing the Epley maneuvers. And that was part of the problem is we still couldn't get to the bottom of it, but we are now and he's doing much better. So thank you. Thank you. Harm OCD, I'm happy to answer questions if folks drop some in about that. So yeah, but I want to start with guilt and shame. What is your experience navigating guilt and shame in the midst of OCD? I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like for me. I would love to hear from y'all what that means. Yeah, Love Lana says guilt and shame, ick. Yeah, they're really, really hard. So at least in my experience, I know everyone's OCD experience is different. I always kind of felt like I would trade off in some ways the anxiety on most days to get rid of the guilt and shame. And guilt, I think it's always really important to separate guilt from shame. Guilt is this feeling of, I must have done something wrong. And shame is, well, what if I'm a bad person? What if that makes me a horrible human being to my core? And I'm curious if folks in the chat can relate to the core fear for OCD for so many of us. It's definitely my core fear being, what if I'm a bad person? What if I am a really bad person? That's been a really tough one for me. And no matter the theme that's popped up at different points throughout my life, whether it's been harm, which I know someone mentioned in the chat, or if it's been sexual orientation OCD or POCD or false memory or real event or contaminant, and anything that you can think of, it's always come back to me to this core fear of what if I'm a bad person? And that's been something that's been really, really tough to navigate. I see Love Lana says that that's the hardest part because integrity is one of your highest priorities. And absolutely, it can feel like this conflicting value, I think, where we often, at least for me, I'm a chaplain, I'm an ordained minister. A lot of my life was based around wanting to help people and wanting to be a quote unquote good person. So OCD latches onto those things and really twists it, really makes you question. But I think it can become confusing because when we think about our values, it's like, well, my value is to be nice to people, but my OCD is telling me that I am not any of those things. And that can be really tough. I see, Sarah, you relate to this. For me, most of my themes center around being a bad mom. So the thought is, I've made a mistake. I must be a bad mom. Yeah. Guilt and yeah. So Leanne, guilt and shame, not necessarily for having OCD, although that does come up. It's actually something we were talking about in the Helping Professionals with OCD SIG last night, where sometimes in particular roles, we feel like, what if anyone knew about my OCD? That was my experience. I felt for a long time in kind of a public ministry role, if anybody knew that I had this diagnosis, they wouldn't, what if they didn't trust me? What if they no longer wanted me to be a minister or a leader? What if they would no longer look to me? So there was this shame, particularly because early on I had a mentor who told me that it would ruin my career in ministry if I sought treatment. So that created this guilt and shame for me about even having OCD, Leanne. But the other piece I'm really talking about is even just guilt and shame around the obsessions themselves, particularly if we're thinking about taboo, intrusive thoughts, and the guilt and the shame that comes up with those. Mike, guilt over exposures, absolutely. I think, it's something that I see with religious scrupulosity all the time, where there's this guilt around, well, I'm doing this really hard exposure in favor of getting back to my life, in favor of reclaiming everything that I care about from a faith perspective. But I feel really guilty doing these kind of tricky exposures. And that can be really, really, really hard. So, again, curious for others to continue to chime in with this guilt and shame component. But one of the reasons, if I'm honest about my own journey, one of the reasons I advocate is I think actually sharing, oh, Stacy, I'm so glad. Oh, Leslie Shapiro is amazing. So glad she helped you with the guilt piece. That is so amazing. And I think a lot of times when we advocate, when we share our stories, when we engage in treatment, and when we offer ourselves the same love and compassion that we offer to others, that guilt and shame kind of no longer has the same fuel to its fire. At least in my experience, starting to, and really, I guess if I'm going to be mushy, a lot of y'all in here know Ethan because you're used to Ethan being on here. He was the first person in my life, even as a friend, before we even dated, that helped me figure out what did it actually mean to love myself. Because of my intrusive thoughts, because of the things that I thought about myself, that became so confused with my identity. I kind of hated myself. I thought I was a horrible person. I thought I didn't deserve to get better. And there was this aspect of being able to say, yeah, you know what, I can have these intrusive thoughts and it doesn't mean anything. And I can still love myself. And I am deserving of a big, beautiful, awesome life that made shame and guilt a lot smaller. And I think continuing to advocate with so many amazing people here, we can kind of continue to decrease that guilt and shame. I would imagine that even by chiming in and supporting others in the chat, that advocacy is a big way to make guilt and shame smaller. There's actually even exposures that we can do around experiences. So I ended up doing a lot of exposures around how do I sit with these feelings of guilt and shame, recognizing that they're not dangerous feelings and they're also not facts. Just because I'm feeling this doesn't mean it's a fact, doesn't mean I need to act on that in a certain way. Yeah, let's see, Stacy. Yeah, Self-Compassion by Kristen Neff. Amazing. I also love the Self-Compassion workbook for OCD by Kim Quinlan. If folks are if folks are not familiar with that, that's absolutely amazing. Yeah. Is Ethan sick? Yeah. So I was sharing a little while ago, he's had some really bad vertigo the past couple of weeks. So he is on the mend, but is looking forward to being back with everyone. So yeah, thank you. Okay, so I have a bunch of other questions that folks chimed in on. Of course, happy to go back to the guilt and shame piece if folks are interested in that. I think I saw a question up above. Yeah, so I see Lola at 707, how to best deal with soon leaving therapy because recovery has been good. I should feel happy and proud, but I'm also nervous as to how being in this side of recovery looks like. So Lola, thank you so much for sharing this. Transitioning out of treatment can be super scary. And I'll be honest, I resonate with this in a big way. I remember really in 2019 transitioning out of treatment with my therapist and her actually telling me, you're doing really great. Like you can do this on your own. And I kind of looked around and I was like, am I doing really great? OCD feels really hard. And yes, I'm not engaging in compulsions the same way that I used to, and I'm functioning in life, but it still feels really, really tough. And it terrified me. I remember telling her, well, I'm not ready yet. No, you have to keep seeing me. And she kind of kicked me out the door. And I know a lot of people have that experience. And it's not because your provider doesn't care about you or doesn't want to see you anymore. It's really because I think there's this next phase of recovery when we're doing really well of needing to know that we can, in fact, do it on our own. It's almost becoming our own therapist. And I'm working with a few clients right now who are transitioning with their providers. And that's really tough because it's scary. It's like, well, can I do this on your own or on my own? And Lola, I want you to hear that you can, and give yourself permission to feel happy and to feel proud. And at the same time, those emotions of feeling nervous are completely and utterly valid. But I think, carrying confidence with you that everything you have done with your therapist, everything you have done in therapy and treatment, you have built and developed all of these amazing skills and tools that you're going to carry with you. And there might be bumps, there might be stuck points, but actually the way for you to get to the next level of living your best life as present as possible is for you to kind of take this transition, to take this next step. And it's because you're doing so well. And this gives you space to continue living this big, beautiful, awesome life that you were created to live. Here's also the thing, there's always support, right? So if you get to be in a space where you're like, oh, this is really stuck, I don't know what to do, or I need some extra support right now, I know you have all of us here on these streams at the IOCDF. There's awesome support groups. And then a lot of therapists also will do booster sessions and that's something that you can ask about, where if 6 months down the line, something pops up and you feel like, oh, I need support in this area, that you might be able to reach out for a booster session. So I want you to know, transitioning, it doesn't mean that you are totally alone, but it also means that you can do it. And I'm super proud of you for being at a space where you are ready to take that next step. It's a really big deal. Okay, let me scroll back down here. Let's see. Love Lana, thank you so, so much. Yes, Jess, what we were talking about, vulnerability is the antidote to shame. Brene Brown, yes, absolutely. So when we vulnerably share, and Ethan says this a lot, I think sometimes advocacy, is of course we want to help people through our stories, but it also helps me stay in recovery, right? It helps me every time, and I can talk authentically about this in my own life, but every time I hit a stuck point, which does happen for sure, and there's been some over the past few weeks, I literally think about advocacy. I think about these streams and I think, oh man, what am I telling people to do? What am I telling my clients to do? How do I want to show up on that stream and say that I handled this? And being vulnerable, advocating helps me stay in recovery, but also helps me get rid of the shame of this disorder. I don't know, I'm getting emotional about that, but I think it's very, very true, Jess. Um, let's see. Oh, Dylan, that's a great question. I'm going to try to think through it as I answer it. How did you find guidance for exposures and sitting with guilt and shame while realizing it's not fact? So I think some of that was definitely work over time with my therapist to start to recognize as a whole that just because we feel something doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. So, for instance, like same with the work that you might do around anxiety. I love picking out particular feelings and sensations that we're feeling in our body. When you're anxious, I might ask you, what does this actually feel like? And you might say, okay, well, my heart is pounding. Well, I feel a tightness in my chest. And being able to actually name that and say, well, is something bad happening right now in this moment? And being able to separate, just because we feel that doesn't mean that something scary is happening, right? And I think the same comes up with guilt and shame, of being able to recognize through that process. So for me, this might sound really minor, but it was really hard for me. I did particular exposures where I would intentionally bring on feelings of guilt and shame, and I would sit in those for 3 minutes, just 3 minutes. Like 3 minutes was literally all I could handle, and I would allow that to be there. And coming out of that, I would always recognize, okay, I'm still safe. It doesn't mean that anything's changed, but I've been working on teaching myself that I can, in fact, sit with these scary feelings. So I think the guidance for that was definitely through a therapeutic setting. But I also really like the idea of, alongside the exposures that you're doing, focusing on self compassion, self compassion, self compassion, self compassion. And a great guide for that, I know some folks plugged in some resources earlier, but especially Kim Quinlan's book that I mentioned, is really great for how do we lean into really scary exposures and still recognize, at the same time, this is not us and we're worthy of getting better. And just a reminder, I don't think this is reassurance, but rather affirmation and truth, that OCD is ego dystonic. It attaches to the things that are the most significant to us and it twists them. It's the reason that we're so stuck on something to begin with, is because it's so incredibly important to us. Um, okay, I see. Oh, thank you. Yeah, so I see Stacy plugging in the Kristen Neff book and the Kim Quinlan book. Thank you so much. Yeah, Kristen Neff's work is absolutely Amazing. Um, yeah, so I see at 717, Two Bros says, any advice on health anxiety OCD? Been stuck for months. I haven't been seeking as much reassurance and compulsing from medical professionals as I used to, and have been doing ERP, but still stuck. So this is a great question, and one definitely when Ethan is back, hopefully in 2 weeks, he'll be able to address, because health anxiety is his primary component, and he's been dealing with some actual health stuff the past few weeks, which has made this kind of challenging. First of all, I want to affirm you for um, not seeking as much reassurance and compulsion from and doing compulsions with medical professionals. I want to say that can be so hard. That is such a big step. And I think sometimes when we think about what does it mean to get better, we make the assumption, well, it means we feel better, right? We are riding off into the sunset and everything feels great. Well, that's not necessarily how it happens. At first, it's not engaging in compulsions, not continuing to give value to that content. So I think with health anxiety, the biggest thing to focus on with the ERP that you're mentioning is being able to say, that is really scary. Maybe, maybe not, but I'm going to choose to not engage in this right now. I'm going to choose not to Google. I'm going to choose not to reach out to a health professional. But then the next part is not necessarily looking to feel better right away. I think this is going to sound strange, and folks can comment later if this is helpful or not, or if you resonate with this. But at least for me, what happened for such a long time, I was doing really great with the exposures. I thought I was doing really awesome with response prevention because I wasn't, to your point, like reaching out to folks for reassurance. I wasn't doing those physical compulsions, but I was still ruminating. And ruminating, any mental compulsion that we do, is still a compulsion that still keeps us stuck. And what I found was one of my biggest compulsions that I had no idea I was doing was actually specifically going around and around in my head to see, was I still anxious? Was the intrusive thought still there? Was that still stuck? Was I still feeling like that was real? Was I feeling better yet? I was actually checking in my head to see whether or not I felt better. And I wonder if this is something with the health anxiety piece. You can answer below if this is something you resonate with. I think it is such a win that you are not doing those physical compulsions. But I wonder if there's a mental element where you're still feeling stuck, of still trying to figure out, either am I feeling better or do I have this illness or something of that nature? And if that is the case, what I would really encourage you to do, which seems scary, but this was really helpful for me, is to say, you know what? I am willing to feel this icky for the rest of my life. And I am still not going to engage in compulsions. I am still not going to check to see if I'm feeling better. And surprisingly, when we start to do that, we actually start to get a little less stuck. When we no longer care about being stuck, things start to separate a little bit more. So I'm curious for you to answer below if that resonates with you. Sarah, yeah, I feel my feelings so hard. It's tough to believe it's not factual. Me too. big me too. So I want to say, when I say that, it is literally not me sitting up on a hill and saying like, yeah, this is super, super easy. And sometimes I get sad on my Instagram post when people will comment and be like, you don't know how hard it is. And I want to be like, I do know how hard it is. Like, trust me. So I want you to know, Sarah, I feel feelings in a really, really big way. I think for those of you on here who know my story, where OCD got really bad for me was when I was serving in a role around grief, trauma, and loss with kids. And I was the chaplain doing grief work for 2,700 families. And my OCD found ways to blame me for losses and for funerals that I was doing that were really upsetting. And I would feel so intensely empathy, emotion for what families were going through, and then just feel guilt and shame beyond anything I can possibly describe for my OCD really latching onto it. And it made it feel so real, and it made it feel so terrifying. I just, the feeling in my core, even when I talk about it, it felt so real. And yet, I think it isn't always, I know it's tough to believe it's not factual. I'm responding to that specifically. I think early on, my insight was really, really low. And I kind of didn't know in some ways what I believed. But there was this element of handing over the keys to people that I cared about, handing over the keys to my provider. And even if I didn't totally believe that it wasn't factual, at least acting as if was a really good place to start. And it was so hard. It felt freaking awful. I felt like I'm this horrible person just pretending to go about my life when I might be responsible for all of these atrocities. And it was hard when I didn't fully buy into the fact that those things weren't my fault, but beginning to act as if. I love the idea of putting shoulders back and doing it with confidence and saying, like, yes, I'm going to live my life today anyway, in the best way that I possibly can. I think was actually a good place to start, where eventually believing it wasn't factual started to follow my actions. So I'm curious if that resonates with you, Sarah. Let's see. Old Wolf 718. Any advice for checking compulsions with sexual orientation OCD? Yeah. So the biggest advice with any checking compulsions I have is to, well, I always want to say it was like, stop checking, let's not do any more checking. But I know it doesn't necessarily work like that. I think it's actually setting even some goals for yourself in a small way to be able to one, recognize with your therapist, always, if you can, working with a provider is really helpful to develop a hierarchy, to recognize what's the obsession and what are the compulsions. Because even with sexual orientation OCD, obsessions can take on so many different forms. But then what are the compulsions that you're doing? When we're talking about checking, are we talking about checking via Google? Are we talking about mental checking? Are we talking about checking of bodily functions or how your body feels? What are we doing with that? And then being able slowly over time to, yes, do exposures, but also to really stop engaging in that checking, even if it's in really small increments. I never think it's realistic to say, or to make a proclamation and say, I am never going to Google ever again. That doesn't work. Some y'all can argue with me below if you think that that works, but I will say I wrote out proclamations like 50,000 times throughout my journey. I even remember one New Year's writing out this literally like 15-page proclamation and reading it to my family before midnight that said, I will never engage in compulsions ever again for the rest of my life. And here's why. I think I did a compulsion like 3 days later and then totally fell off the bandwagon because I was really hard on myself about not following through with the thing that I set out to do. So I promise I'm getting back to your question. This is a long way to answer it. But I was run support groups on Wednesday night around faith and OCD, and we always end with compassionate commitments. And what that is setting a goal for ourselves that really challenges us in our recovery. But the idea is we're committing to it, but we're going to offer ourselves love and compassion, even if we don't do it perfectly. And I think what that does is it gives us an opportunity to give ourselves compassion, but not be satisfied as we step forward. It gives us an opportunity to not beat ourselves up if we do a compulsion again instead of never do it ever again. But it keeps us on track to do that less and less and less until we can get to the point where we're not doing those things anymore. So with checking compulsions, again, work with your therapist, but it might be, I am only going to check this many times today, or I am going to delay this long before I check. And maybe then we're going to delay again. So being able, rather than making it this huge thing of I can never do this ever again, really thinking of it just like exposures in a hierarchical form where we can really decrease the amount of checking that we're doing. Okay. Yeah, and I see Michael too struggling with mental compulsions and rumination around BDD. Compulsions, rumination is so hard, and I'm so glad we're spending some time talking about that tonight. That's one of the hardest ones for me. And I see others struggling with BDD too. So challenging. And the rumination in particular, what I want to highlight with that and with body dysmorphic disorder, I know Chris, who's going to be on our live stream tomorrow, Wednesday, is a big expert in that for our noon live stream. So I know he can answer some of those questions better than I can. But from the rumination perspective, I get the question a lot of how can we separate in intrusive thought or an obsession from the compulsion when it's rumination. And I'd love to share with you kind of how I navigate this. I always think of the initial thing that pops up, that initial what if, that initial, what if the horrible thing happens? That's the obsession. That's the intrusive thought. We can't control those. Intrusive thoughts are just thoughts. Our brain sees stuff, it makes associations, they pop up. No judgment. It's just what it is. And we get stuck on particular ones or notice them because they're important to us. Okay? So can't control that. What we can control is what comes right after that. So rumination is as soon as we do anything with that intrusive thought, as soon as we go, wait, what? What did that thought mean? I need to think back through everything that I've ever done in my whole life to make sure that that thought isn't true. Or I need to prove to myself that everything is going to be okay if that thought actually happens. Why am I even having that thought? All of those things are us responding to that initial thought. Those are rumination. Those are things we can control. Now, a lot of times it doesn't feel like we can control them. I remember for me feeling like it was like a snap, like it happened immediately. But I actually love seeing that as a mindfulness practice. If you've ever had the experience of meditating is not sitting and thinking about nothing. It's being as present as possible. And every time your mind drifts, bringing your attention back to the present. And that's actually what I try to do with rumination. It's like once I have an intrusive thought and I notice that I'm doing some ruminating, I'm like, oh, cool, I can name it. I am ruminating right now. I'm going to do my best to come back to my five senses, to come back to what's in this moment. If 5 seconds later I catch myself ruminating again, what a great opportunity again. I am not going to be mean to myself about it, but I'm going to gently come back to this moment. And it might sound really exhausting to do that over and over and over again, but eventually it doesn't feel like you're doing it over and over again. It's kind of like building a muscle, like if you go to the gym, where that time between becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, where you really start to be able to notice if you're ruminating and it feels like more of a choice maybe than it did to begin with. So I'm curious if that resonates for folks. Love Lana, thank you so much for the prayers for Ethan. Nikki, it is so wonderful to see you. Beth, yeah, for anybody who came on late, Beth, or anyone else, Ethan is experiencing, he's had some tough vertigo for the last 2 weeks and has been kind of having trouble functioning with the dizziness. He is doing okay. He is actually doing much better. He is on the mend. And he is so excited to be back with y'all. And I know that he will have lots of health anxiety stories when he gets back in the next 2 weeks and can't wait to share all the things. Yeah, Amy, we are not our feelings. Absolutely. Sarah, affirmation versus reassurance. Interesting because I've been trying to avoid the latter so much. I haven't allowed myself the former. Yeah. So it's funny, even so the groups I run on Wednesdays, I have a whole disclaimer at the beginning that's like, we do not offer reassurance. We will not offer reassurance to one another, but we will offer affirmation. And how I separate it, and especially this is always helpful, I think, for family members too, or for loved ones. Reassurance is about the content. It's about saying, oh, the content, it's totally fine. Everything is going to be okay. We don't want to address the content. Affirmation, I think, is about almost validating the feelings that someone's experiencing. So you can affirm without reassuring. So for instance, like with a partner, this comes up with Ethan and I often. If I am sitting there thinking, oh my goodness. Okay, so this is a great example. So if I get off the stream tonight and I'm like, oh my goodness, I said all the wrong things. Everybody there hates me. Oh my gosh, Ethan, do you think they hate me? Do you think everybody hates me? Do you think I did awful? Okay, so reassurance would be if he said, no, 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 Katie, everybody loves you. You did a great job. That's not going to be helpful. My OCD is immediately going to poke holes in that and tell him, you don't really know, or you didn't hear that thing I said, or you don't know what other people are thinking. That's not helpful. But how he might affirm without reassuring might be, wow, that seems really, really hard. That sounds like it feels really, really scary for you right now. Whew. Those really scary emotions are totally and completely valid. And I don't want to reassure you right now, but I am willing to sit with you in the midst of those because I know that's really hard. So I'm not sure if y'all might see the difference. We can say, those emotions are hard. That guilt, that shame is hard. It feels so real, but I don't have to acknowledge that content right now. Okay. Yeah, safety behaviors can be really hard to stop doing. Yeah. Oh, okay. Two bros. I'm glad that y'all are set for a call and that you'll be able to talk when he is feeling better. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. I know everything for him has kind of gotten pushed out a little bit until he gets better. Um, yeah, Stacy, responsibility, OCD, and guilt over responsibility all the way. I think so many of us feel that regardless of the theme, where it feels like we are responsible for everything in the world. We were talking about this in our helping professionals with OCD group last night, where often we can recognize that other people aren't responsible for everything in the world, but we might not be able to recognize that in our own life. I am a prime example of that. I would tell any of you on here that you deserve the utmost compassion, that it is okay to be imperfect, that it is okay to change your schedule, that it's okay to set boundaries. The biggest struggle I have in my own life is saying that to myself because I feel like, well, no, but I'm the one person who's actually responsible for making sure that every single person's okay. Y'all, like everybody totally understands if you're not doing that, but I have to do that, right? And I'm curious, and y'all can chime in the chat if you feel like that, where I am the one person that has to be held to this different standard, which you don't, by the way, but OCD makes it feel like you do. Let's see. I struggle with at 724, I struggle with harm OCD, but after I have my baby, I start to struggle more. And specifically, I start to have doubts if I love my baby or not. Oh, yeah. Sometimes my brain says, you don't love him, you don't care. I am so sorry. And my heart breaks for you. And I want you to hear, and this is affirmation, not the reassurance. I want you to hear that you are so not alone. This is so incredibly common for individuals with OCD in having kids and after having a baby. And I am so sorry for those really tough emotions that you're experiencing. But I also want you to know that OCD lies. And OCD is literally latching on to the thing that's the most important, the most significant to you. And it's twisting it. It is twisting it all around. And I think the more we continue to give into it, the more it continues to get bigger and bigger. So I would love to see down from you below. Are you currently working with a therapist? Are you currently in treatment? Because this is something, thinking about exposure and response prevention, that even if it's really hard, could be a really, really awesome opportunity for us to be able to respond to your brain with non-engagement responses and say, maybe I don't really care about my child. That sounds awful, right? Maybe not. But it isn't you actually saying that to the content. It's saying it to the OCD. And I think of ERP, I think of non-engagement responses, not as saying that the scary thing is true. That is never what I'm saying. But it's about embracing a sense of uncertainty so that we can reclaim the lives that we were created to live, that life that you absolutely deserve to live with your child. I see ERP as a spiritual practice, as a value-driven practice that you can get back to doing those things that you care about. And I'm curious what your experience is. Often with folks that I talk with who struggle with this around their kids, the really sad thing is OCD will say, you can't engage with your kids or with your family member because OCD will be like, I'm trying to keep them safe. You need to stay back, right? And the reality is, OCD almost becomes this self-fulfilling prophecy. We want to do everything that we can to protect our kids. And the reality is that OCD making up all the stuff that it does and us giving it energy, we're actually not protecting our kids because we're taking a step back, because we're not able to be in relationship. The same with anything. With our OCD, often someone will say, well, I can't necessarily be around my partner because I'm scared I'm a really bad partner, right? But the reality is OCD is taking away their ability to be a good partner because they can't be around their partner. OCD takes away everything it claims to protect. And I just want you to know that you deserve to have a big, beautiful life with your baby. And I know that treatment is something that could really help you with that. Jessica at 724, speaking of health anxiety, listen to your podcast on relationships with Kim Quinlan. I'm so glad that you listened to that. Ethan and I had so much fun doing that episode. And for folks who haven't listened to it, it's on Your Anxiety Toolkit. And it was probably the most raw that we have ever been about relationship stuff. And we shared things that we did not necessarily intend to share. So it was really meaningful. But you asked, as a partner of someone who may be experiencing some of this right now, what are you learning about supporting versus enabling your partner during these kinds of episodes? Partner of someone with OCD, asking for myself. Yeah, absolutely. So gosh, it's so I think there's this I have so much, we could do a whole thing on this. I feel like there's communication as a part of this. And the reason I say this is when I am stuck in an OCD spiral, the way that Ethan responds to me that's effective is actually very different than the way that I respond to him. I think for both of us, there's this sense of affirmation of the feeling and then not addressing the content. But I think the way that we do that that's effective for each of us might be different. So I'll give you an example. For me, the most helpful thing that Ethan does if I am stuck in my normal loop of what if I'm a bad person? What if everybody hates me? What if I'm an imposter? Same old record, different day. Him saying, that sounds really hard and it sounds a lot like OCD. I'm not going to engage that right now, but I'm going to sit with you in the midst of that is really effective for me. For him, actually responding in a harsher way, not being mean. I think it's always being harsh to the OCD and not to your partner. But I know that that's something that's effective for him. So I do always say things like, wow, this sounds really, really scary right now. And also, we're not going to continue to talk about this. And also, I am not going to let you to continue to ask for reassurance. And also, we are not going to engage in compulsions right now. And it might sound really similar, but even the tone in how we respond is really different because that's what he responds to the most effectively. That's what he has shared with me is the most helpful for him. So I actually think that this could be maybe not in the height of an OCD episode where that's probably not the most helpful, but when there isn't an episode going on, to have a conversation, even including the therapist, can be great about what's the most helpful, what's the most effective for your partner. And I really just want to applaud you also that you are on here and that you are learning and that you're wanting to support your partner. And I want to say with health anxiety, it's really, really hard. I'll be transparent. I'm sure Ethan will see this at some point. So I'm just gonna be honest. It's been hard for me these last couple of weeks with all that he's been experiencing with vertigo because it's very real from a physical sense. And also OCD creeps in there too. And to be honest, it's hard for me because I also have OCD. And then sometimes my OCD lashes onto it and I have to really navigate that. But over the past few weeks, I've worked really, really hard to whatever he's experiencing physically or from, again, a feeling perspective to be able to say, okay, like, I'm so sorry you're feeling that. But any of the what ifs that come up around it, I haven't done this perfectly, but I've done my best to draw a really hard line and say, I don't think it's helpful for me to answer this question right now. So Jessica, I hope that's really, really helpful. I'm sorry that y'all are navigating this. I know it can be really, really hard. And my heart is definitely with you. Let's see. Shaimei at 725. Yeah, I'm so sorry for the feelings that you remember. I know we're talking about feelings not being facts, but I also know really hearts. We're sending you lots and lots of love and you are not alone. Yeah, Beth. Yeah, the ER panic attacks. Oh, those feelings feel so incredibly real. So incredibly real. Thank y'all for the kind comments. Yeah. So two bros at 725, like not ritualizing and still feeling just really crappy can be such a tough thing. And again, I'm actually really glad that you're going to be plugging in and talking with Ethan about that. I think that's really awesome. I want to tell you that I think, I'll say I think because we're all about uncertainty, right? But it gets better. I think it gets a lot better. So I remember if you would have asked me in 2019, would I ever be in a space where I didn't feel so crappy? I would have told you no. Frankly, I was kind of pissed because I was watching people advocate. I remember being at the conference and being like, okay, I've worked so freaking hard in treatment and I still feel awful. I still feel really bad. And I remember looking at other advocates and being like, they feel better. like, well, I wasn't, I guess, looking at advocates. I definitely wasn't advocating. I didn't want anybody to know what I was going through. But I was thinking, there's no way that my symptoms could decrease. It's just not going to happen. And I want you to know that I think, again, when we get to the point where we say, okay, this feels really bad and I am still not going to ritualize, I do think that those things eventually come. And I think part of that is it took a while for me, if I'm honest, and this might sound disheartening. Hopefully it's hopeful. There was a while that I talk all the time about running towards my values. I was running towards my values when I still felt really bad. And it was really interesting when I got to the point where I stopped checking to see if I felt better. One day I woke up and I kind of noticed, wait, I kind of feel better than I did. Weird. And it was an incremental thing. And I can't think of a particular day where all of a sudden everything was great, but it was this kind of incremental over time process of, yeah, feeling icky and doing the work anyway. And then eventually being able to look back and saying, wow, it took a while and I'm here. And I want you to hear too, bros, it is so, so worth it. And you are so deserving of that. And feeling that ick still right now, I know is really awful. And we have all been there and we are with you in the midst of it. And I just want to let you know that we are sending you lots of love, but I also believe that you're going to get to a totally different place than you are right now. Let's see. Oh, I love seeing everybody advocate for each other and alongside each other in the chat. Thank you all so much. I'm going to keep scrolling down and see if, yes, Lola, thank you for the postpartum support group. Absolutely. So glad that I'm seeing all kinds of advocacy with that for free Zooms, catastrophic thinking. Don't mind me. I'm continuing to scroll to see if there are any more questions. Y'all are such wonderful people. Yeah, chronically dizzy. Yes, thank you all for all the kind words about Ethan too. Okay, wonderful. I think, are there any more questions here? If not, I have a couple other ones in that we can get into. Yeah, vertigo. Oh, yeah, Leanne, in terms of us speaking to each other at home like that. Yeah, we actually really we've done a lot of work on this, especially when we started dating. We're two individuals with OCD, and we've done a lot of work both with his therapist and with my therapist to kind of figure out what is the most effective way for me to respond to him and vice versa. It definitely does not mean that we do it perfectly, but I think it can be really, really helpful to, as much as possible, respond in the way that's effective for that person. And sometimes when I do have to be really harsh in ways with him, or he has to be harsh with me, I think it's important to recognize in the moment he might not be super thrilled about it, or I might not be super thrilled about it. Even when he's being nice and compassionate and how he responds to me, I get frustrated sometimes. I'll be like, can't you just tell me just this one time that you think I'm a good person? Like, seriously? I will do that. And I love when he's then able to say no, and I'll get really mad. And he'll say, okay, cool, but I'm responding to your OCD right now. I'm not responding to you. Sometimes he'll say, okay, I'm talking to OCD. Can you put Katie back on the phone? And it can be helpful in those moments to remember that you're responding to your partner or whoever it is in your life, to their OCD, not actually to them. Leanne, yeah, is it wrong for people to tell you that you are not a bad person? Great question. So, I mean, just in general, in the general population, no. But if I'm asking it from a space of reassurance, then it's not going to be helpful in that moment. Even if that's the reality, it's just not what's going to be helpful, because as soon as someone offers reassurance, OCD pokes holes in it. And that's really with anything, even if I told someone, well, you're not actually harmful, or you're not actually a bad partner, OCD is going to poke holes in it because of the reassurance, where OCD isn't about logic. So, Leanne, if you told me, well, Katie, you're really not a bad person, and I'm in an OCD episode, I'm going to get that relief for just a second of, well, Leanne doesn't think I'm bad, so it's okay. And then all of a sudden, OCD is going to poke some new holes. I might start going, Well, does Leanne really know? She doesn't actually know that thing that I thought earlier. And how about all the other people on the stream? What if they think I'm a really bad person? And if she really knew me better, maybe she would think that I am too. So this can take all sorts of different turns just by nature of us. I don't know, getting reassurance, even if it feels really, really harmless. So I love that you note that because yes, in other areas, I think asking what is the function of something that we are questioning, that can be really helpful. So if someone is asking you, huh, do you think I'm good at this particular thing because they're genuinely curious versus do you think I'm really good at it because it feels guilt provoking and shame provoking and urgent and all sorts of stuff. Those are two really different things. That's how I go back to separating out OCD from value driven behavior in general. With my religious scrupulosity folks, I'll do a little chart and we'll say, hey, what are we doing from a spiritual perspective, from a space of guilt, fear, anxiety, what feels urgent versus what are we doing from a space of meaning? Like, what is the function of the thing that you're doing? What is the function of the question you're asking? So, with that, if someone's talking about uh, even reading about something theological online, and I ask, what's the function? Well, if the function is because I feel like I need to know the answer right now and it's really urgent and I feel really awful, it's like, yeah, probably OCD. But if it's, oh, I could do it later, I'm just genuinely curious, it's like that's a value. So even if we're asking, am I a good person, whatever, even thinking about what's the function of that question. Um, yeah, Sherry, I see I struggle with scrupulosity, struggle with what's real and what's my OCD. That can be so hard. So that's, I'm a faith leader and I work at the intersection of faith and OCD and specialize in scrupulosity not as a clinician, but alongside treatment teams. And so for folks who are wondering, scrupulosity is really it's a subtype of OCD that involves moral or religious obsessions. And that can be really hard because, again, OCD is taking and twisting those things that we value the most. But I also want you to hear from a hope perspective. I watch folks engage in evidence based treatments like ERP every single day and totally reclaim their lives from scrupulosity. So I want you to know that I think sometimes there's this stigma that because it's around morality or because it's around religion or because it's a little bit more ambiguous that it's more difficult to treat. You can still get so much better. So I want you to know that. Yes, Beth, I know you, Beth, every time I see anything about hermit crabs, I think of you and I get super, super excited. So I love that. I think I've told you before, I used to, when I was a kid, love hermit crabs and I actually like babysat for other people's hermit crabs. And like, I did all sorts of hermit crab research and I had like the bathing water and the drink, all the things that you probably know, but I love that you love them. So sending you lots of love. Yeah, incremental. I love Amy. Yeah, you can learn to trust yourself and not engage the OCD scammer. Yes, absolutely. Two bros, not giving your loved ones reassurance is really difficult, especially with the health OCD, because your parents and friends want you to realize you don't have a brain tumor, but also don't want to feed the OCD. Yeah, so you just pointed out exactly what we sometimes navigate in our house, and that can be really, really tricky. And I think it's at the same time, that's where getting parents or getting loved ones involved with treatment can be really, really helpful for them to know that the reassurance around saying like, no, you totally don't have a brain tumor isn't actually going to help their health overall. But that can be so tough. And that's why I really like saying we're talking to the OCD in that moment. We're actually not talking to that person. How do we want to respond to OCD? And maybe we can have a logical conversation with that person at a different point. But in the throes of that reassurance seeking, we're not going to respond to OCD. Let's see. Jessica, 749, found it helpful to name my partner's OCD bully. Yes, I love that. So I love the concept of the OCD bully. He calls him Oscar, and it kind of takes the edge off sometimes. It sounds like Oscar talking. Oscar's loud today, huh? I kind of love that. That's awesome. I think I've talked in previous streams about the fact that for a long time, there's other advocates with the IOCDF who have done this too. I've named like ex-significant other, my OCD after ex-significant others and ex-partners, ex-boyfriends. And for a long time, my OCD was named Frank after a guy that I dated a long time ago. So I'd be like, oh man, Frank is just being really loud again. Seriously? Come on, Frank. So Jessica, I love that. And I think anywhere that we can add humor to it can also be really helpful and really effective. And it's a diffusion exercise too, what you're talking about, being able to separate kind of ourselves from that. Just like we would say, I notice I'm having an intrusive thought that blah, 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 blah. We're kind of diffusing from it when we're able to separate. Well, that's OCD. That's not actually my identity. Yeah, Leanne, OCD will attack whatever you say. I'm glad you've got me, but thank you for wanting to reassure. Yeah, I find it helpful when someone says, I'm talking to your OCD. I think that really can, and I think that's something we've come back to a lot tonight, is talking to your OCD, not to you as a person, can be really helpful. And even saying that to someone in your life, whew, sounds like OCD is at the forefront right now, or sounds like Oscar is really at the forefront right now. I don't think engaging at this time is really, really helpful. Can be great. Yeah, Stacy at 750, we all need to remember what we are going through is not permanent. It is one moment at a time. Be kind to you. And I hope you hear that for yourself too. I hope everyone on here hears that you deserve the same love and compassion that you so freely offer to those around you, the same love and compassion that I've seen you offer to every single person in this comment thread tonight. You are so deserving of that, even if OCD says that you're not. Yeah, I see. So the question at 750, what about that you're faking being a nice person? That's not the real you. Those thoughts. So it's really funny. On Instagram today, just so I can say it, I probably have it like right here. That was actually my post earlier today is, what if I'm pretending to have OCD and I'm actually a horrible person? That was my graphic, because I've gotten that question so many times this week. And the reason I'm saying this is, you are so not alone in feeling like that, and it's just OCD. And you are so not alone in feeling like that, and it's just OCD. So I just want you to know that this is such a common thing where we question even the diagnosis itself and wonder, what if I'm just bad and I'm just pretending to have OCD? Even that, without trying to have certainty, we can say, maybe, but I'm going to trust in this moment, it's probably just OCD, because if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. If it looks like OCD and smells like OCD, probably OCD. Or it looks like OCD, what ifs like OCD, probably OCD. Okay. So I know we just are in the last like 3 minutes here. So I just wanted to see if there's any more questions. So Cole at 752, how do you get rid of OCD? So OCD, I think it's always less about like, how do I get rid of it? Because I think we think of it as a chronic disorder, but it's also not something that has to be in the driver's seat of your life forever by any means. It's not something that's in the driver's seat of mine. It could be tough sometimes, but it's something that I think we can all live a big, beautiful, awesome life with. And the way to do that is by engaging in evidence-based treatment. The gold standard treatment for OCD is under the umbrella of CBT. It's called exposure and response prevention. I know we've talked about it a little bit tonight, but you can look at all kinds of resources on the IOCDF website, as well as a fantastic resource that can actually link you up with particular providers in your area that are trained in ERP. But essentially it's a treatment where you are engaging in exposures that bring up the things that you are afraid of, those obsessions, without engaging in the responses, without engaging in the compulsions or in the safety behaviors. And over time, we habituate and we don't feel that same level of anxiety with the fears that pop up. Now, let me say, treatment is not about getting rid of the anxiety. It's really learning to sit with those thoughts. But really the byproduct is being able to reclaim our life where it doesn't feel so scary anymore. It doesn't feel so hard anymore. And that really is a possibility. So I always think of, as long as we go, I want to get rid of OCD, it's probably going to come on stronger. But if we're like, cool, I have OCD, how can we treat this and live a beautiful life? There are so many possibilities for that. So, Cole, I hope you check out all of the awesome ERP resources. Okay. Oh, Stacy, thank you for your kind words. My OCD is the puppeteer and I'm the puppet. Beth, that is my biggest prayer and hope for you is I want you to become the puppeteer in your own life. And I believe you can, and you so deserve to be able to do that. I also didn't think that I would be able to for such a long time. I know that you can. Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, so I'll end on this one. So Beth, I'm sorry, I know we're a minute over, but I just wanted to get through all the questions. So Beth, how do advocates recommend responding to regular people saying they are so OCD when they mean they're being perfectionistic about cleanliness? So whew, could go on for this for a long time too. I think our most recent town hall, we actually talked about this with all of our national and lead advocates and responding to this. But I think what I always come back to is there's different ways to respond depending on the person. I like to think about calling in versus calling out. If it's somebody that you know that is not meaning it in an intentional way, or that this is the first time this is coming up, calling in and saying, that actually is really hurtful. I want to tell you what OCD actually is, because when we use these terms in this way, it's preventing people from getting treatment for a really debilitating disorder. And if they listen up, we've educated someone, we've created an ally who's going to be able to share that with others. Now, if we've already tried to call in and it's someone who has not been particularly receptive or is saying things that are intentionally harmful, if it's we've seen a ton of big corporations that have done media campaigns with the word OCD that have not responded to us effectively when we've reached out. If it's that, then it can become a time to call out, where I think it's a really great opportunity for the community, not in a mean way, but to come together and really stand up and say, nope, okay, we don't stand for that. And we want to educate the public on what OCD is. Both ways I think are effective in different scenarios. Okay. Thank you all so much. I am seeing more just lovely, lovely comments. I know it is bedtime for lots of folks. It's like getting close to bedtime for me, and checking on Ethan and all sorts of things. But just so glad to have y'all here tonight. And just as we close, really quick, online OCD conference registration is open. You can visit iocdf.org/online OCDcon to register. This year's online OCD conference will feature 2 days of virtual programming for the entire OCD and related disorders community. So we really hope to see you there. We're super pumped. Walks are taking place across the country. You can visit iocdf.org/walk to find a walk near you. And the online proposal system for online OCD camp is now open. If you're interested in presenting programming for this special event, you can go to iocdf.org/camp. Finally, this live stream is one of many. You can see the whole schedule of future streams at iocdf.org/peace of mind. Just to let you know what's coming up, we have a lunch and learn right back here tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern. And then next Tuesday, I believe we have another community conversations at 7 Eastern. And then next Wednesday, we have another lunch and learn. Lots of awesome stuff coming up. And for all of that, you can also go back and view past stuff. You can view recordings of past live streams, as well as watch our hosts answer your pre-submitted questions, OCD Mailbag, on IOCDF's YouTube channel, youtube.com/IOCDF. Remember, of course, to like and subscribe to get notified when live streams are scheduled. And if you need resources for any of the things we've chatted about today, please visit iocdf.org. So y'all, it has been such a pleasure to be with you tonight. Please reach out to the IOCDF or reach out to me personally if you have any questions. I want y'all to know that you are absolutely not alone on the journey. And I guess just to close, in the way of talking about self-compassion tonight and talking about OCD and feelings and not being facts, I just want you to know that wherever you are on the journey right now, whatever OCD is making up, whatever it's saying, whatever the intrusive thoughts are, whatever the feelings are, you are so deserving of the love and compassion that you offer to those around you. You are deserving of treatment and you are deserving of reclaiming the big, beautiful, awesome life you were created to live. So thank you all so much. Sending you so much love. See you next time.